Is the Northern Ireland tech bubble about to burst? The local recruitment companies are being kept very busy. You'll see a few of them about here today, as the continued announcement of companies choosing or increasing their presence in Northern Ireland is growing. But is it sustainable? Are we going to run out of people? Are we going to run out of talent to help keep this growth going? And to have this discussion and to talk us through it, we've got Lynne Rainey from PwC, James McLaughlin from Ulster University, Chris Johnson from Queen's University, William Revels from PwC, George McKinney from Invest Northern Ireland, and Simon Cole from Automated Intelligence. I'll get off the stage and I'll leave you to the panel discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. Everyone, welcome to this panel discussion. Really excited to have you here in the building here in St. George's Market. And for those online, again, welcome to this panel. So we have about 45 minutes, I think, to have a discussion about, is the Northern Ireland technology bubble about to burst? I'm Lynne Rainey. I'm a partner at PwC. I'm head of Place and Purpose. And it's a discussion that I've been involved in probably over the last 10 years because part of my role was actually to lead out on student recruitment within our local practice. And 10 years ago, this was a discussion that was being had. It's still being had, and I think it's one that merits a bit of discussion today as well. Not for me to discuss, though. I'm going to chair this panel. I'm going to ask the questions. I'm joined by an esteemed group of individuals who are going to be answering some of the questions that we're going to pose to them. So I'm going to ask them each in turn to just do a wee quick introduction. So can I start with you, Simon?
Sure. Hi, I'm Simon Cole. I'm the CEO of Automated Intelligence. We're a Belfast-based firm really helping organisations, global organisations, take control of some of their data assets and analyse them. I've been working in the tech industry within Northern Ireland for too many decades at this point. We'll just say that. So probably have a perspective in terms of this conversation as well.
Hi, my name is George McKinney. I work for Invest. I'm Director of Technology and Services, which basically means that we're the client-facing function within the organisation. So we represent our clients. Primarily, it's I look after the clients, the businesses that are based in Northern Ireland, but we also take in the FDI companies as part of our portfolio as they integrate it into the local ecosystem. So, thank you.
Hi Lynn, I'm William Revels. I'm Director of Technology with PwC. So I've just recently joined PwC. We launched an innovation centre just in July there. Prior to that, I was with BT for a long time, always working in technology. And I'd just like to say, Lynn, I hope this isn't like Graham Norton with the ejector seats on these chairs. So
I wish I'd thought of that.
I hope not, but thank you. That's me.
Hi, my name's Jim McLaughlin. I'm heading up digital healthcare at the University of Ulster and leading the city deal for the Centre for Digital Healthcare Technology. I've been a wee bit like some of the panellists here, been in the area for 30, 35 years, co-founding some companies around HeartSign at one, Heartscape, and more recently IntelliSense, all companies that have done well and sold and exited. I'm also head of School of Engineering, working very closely with the School of Computing, and director of a research centre called NIBEC.
Hi everyone, I'm Chris Johnson. I'm the Pro Vice Chancellor for Engineering and Physical Sciences at Queen's. My own area though is software engineering in high critical industries. So I started off with NASA in the space area, and I guess the thing I'm most known for at the moment is I'm one of about 12 expert witnesses at the Grenfell Tower inquiry, where I'm looking at data and communication failures that led to potentially loss of life in the fire. So if the bubble bursts, and given that most of my work is in the failure of safety critical software, then it's probably my fault because I've only been here for 14 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you each of you for joining us today. I am conscious in the week when we celebrate diversity and inclusion, this panel doesn't look entirely diverse, but that's due to circumstances slightly beyond our control. And a big thank you to George McKinney also for standing in for Anne Beggs, who couldn't be here for reasons that she really, she just couldn't be here. But George has been very good at stepping in. So to set the context for this conversation, as recently as last week, you may have picked up an article in the Irish News which highlighted that 1 in 7 jobs in Northern Ireland are in the technology sector. Tech Nation has highlighted that companies in Northern Ireland actually raised the biggest amount of money in terms of investment for technology in 2020 than they'd done in the past at £45.6 million. It is a vibrant sector. Digital DNA's list of top 100 tech companies in Northern Ireland, over half of them are classed as homegrown, and about 2/3 of them have either been created or set up in Northern Ireland in the last 10 years. And then linked to that is data that supports a conversation that many of you will be aware of, that it is also technology is a sector where salaries tend to be higher and running at about £10,000 a year higher than most other sectors. So I guess it sort of feels sometimes like it's a bit of a perfect storm. There's lots of opportunity, lots of people wanting to work in the sector. And some of the key questions we're thinking about here are things like, will Northern Ireland be able to sustainably provide the talent now and in the future to meet the needs of the sector? How does FDI money support strategic growth? And what is the future of the Northern Ireland tech sector? So I'm going to start and ask the panel some questions. So, William, maybe if I could start with you. Technology jobs have never been more in demand, and COVID and the acceptance of virtual working as a new norm has made competition for talent really fierce as we all compete on a global level, which begs the question, is the Northern Ireland tech ecosystem growing sustainably, or has the fast-paced growth of recent years left us in a bubble?
Well, I mean, that's a good question, Lynn. And I suppose, are we in a tech bubble, or is that something that's emerging? And maybe, but I think it's a good thing that there's so much work coming into Northern Ireland. But we need to be cognizant of what we can do to mitigate maybe some of the resource challenges around that. And I mean, that's exactly where PwC is, in that space where we're trying to figure out how we can address those resourcing challenges. And for us as an organisation, we're very much at an inflection point, where we recognise that our customers and clients want technology not just to be a bolt-on, but to be a core part of our offerings. And what that means for us is we need to do more technology. And whenever I say more technology, I mean more of our own technology developed by software, which is a difficult thing to do. But we've grasped that challenge, and just recently, as I previously mentioned, we set up an advanced research and engineering centre to do just that. So research to establish the proof points around our business challenges that will then be downstreamed into an at-scale software engineering centre that will deliver efficient and effective software engineered products and services for our customers and clients. And I suppose a lot of people would regard PwC as an audit and consulting firm, but very much we're moving into that software development space. And I guess all organisations now, to a greater or lesser extent, are technology organisations. And what we're doing to create the Research and Engineering Centre over the next couple of years is to recruit 150 software engineers, which is going to be a huge challenge, and recruit 38 postdocs in partnership with both universities here, who will have computing skills and software engineering skills. So I guess in a way, we're definitely contributing to the tech bubble, but we recognise that the mitigations that we need to put in place to maybe address that, and it might be a good segue into describing some of those if you want me to speak about those. Lynn, are you happy enough if I...
Yeah, you can go on, and maybe the universities might want to, maybe Jim or Chris might have a point of view in this as well.
Yeah, sure. So what we've done, there's lots of things we can do to mitigate the tech bubble. I don't think it has to happen. But one of the things that we're doing in PwC, we've created an innovation ecosystem. And the point of that is for us all to work together, because we strongly recognise that you can't do innovation in isolation. And innovation for us isn't just about technology innovation, it's about other types of innovation, but importantly, how we innovate around resourcing. And our ecosystem, I'll just bring it to life a wee bit for you. It's got three components. The first is an industrial partner work stream, where we work with large, medium, small organisations and startup organisations to try and to try and provide help and adjacency to those organisations, but also to be informed and for us to inform them so we can work together on immediate resourcing challenges. The second thing is there's some really big initiatives and important initiatives in Northern Ireland at the minute. We've got the Belfast City Deal, Centre for Digital Healthcare Technologies, Global Innovation Institute, and we're written into those business cases. There's also the AI Centre of Excellence, etc. And the point of all of that is it helps those initiatives and us to have a forward and strategic view of resource forecasting. So that's the whole strategic piece for us. And then another piece that's really important and last but not least is working with the universities. So we're working with both Queen's and Ulster. We've got a novel approach where all of our staff are going to be co-located, and that really embeds the universities in some of our biggest business challenges and technical challenges and informs the universities so that they can tailor their courses and their student output appropriately to meet the needs of industry. So really the message there is, is there a tech bubble? Maybe do we understand what mitigations we have? Well, there's lots of levers, and that's one of them for us all to work together in an inclusive way. And our innovation ecosystem is at least our step in the right direction towards doing that. And happy to speak to anyone after that about how you plug into that. Thanks, Lynn. Sorry, that was a bit long-winded.
All right, well, we'll curtail you in future, William. We'll rein it back in. It's an interesting debate, though, because I know every time there's an announcement of money being made available to local firms, there's a view of, oh, it's another technology company. And the day of the ARC announcement, I had someone in the office from one of the leading technology companies locally, and I was slightly dreading it because I thought, here we go, I'm going to get it between the eyes. More tech jobs. And actually, the view from that individual was, well, yes, it is more tech jobs, but it's the kind of tech jobs that we really want to see. And the piece around FDI, I think, often comes under quite sharp scrutiny. So I'm going to turn to George, and I want Simon's view on this one as well. But is there a case for pausing FDI investments and instead directing funding towards creating and growing our existing companies and talent?
Thanks, Lynn. That's a very interesting question. You won't be surprised to know it's not the first time we've been asked. It's quite a common ask of Invest and I. So the first thing I'd like to do is to acknowledge the issue. There is indeed significant pressure on tech skills in Northern Ireland. But the part of the reason for that is we do have great people. We have well-educated, great work ethic, and that's attractive to businesses across the world. So it's not surprising that there's demand on those people, and the skills that we have are sought after on a global basis. So that's the sort of context. But obviously that does put pressure on the labour market and the businesses in the tech sector. So I understand the problem. There's a bit of a nuance to your question, though. I'd just like to cover off first, if you don't mind. The big FDI projects do grab the headlines. There's no question. And probably for that reason, there is a perception that Invest and I spends a large proportion of its money, or large portion of your money actually, on going towards new FDI. But the reality is, if you actually look back over the last 5 years, 87% of the Invest and I support for the tech sector has gone towards existing local businesses. Now that includes both locally owned and internationally owned businesses, but it's 87% has gone to businesses that are already in Northern Ireland, and only 13% in new FDI, which tends to be the most sort of controversial part of it. So I suppose maybe the surprising answer to your question might be that Invest and I is already directing the majority of its funding towards existing businesses, so we're already doing that to an extent. But there is a saying that perception is reality, so that really doesn't really cut much ice with people who are running businesses and trying to recruit people. So that's really probably less important than the fact that there is the significant pressure in the tech sector. So and that's really what we're talking about here, rather than FDI. It's pressure on the tech sector. As I say, it's a global supply and demand issue. We have a responsibility to attract FDI. And I think most people would agree that FDI has been really good for Northern Ireland over the last, 20 years or so. But I think we also have a responsibility in terms of promoting the supply of talent, and that's alongside colleagues in academia, government and business. So we have a responsibility there, and there's certainly no getting away from that. For our part, what we try and do is to encourage not just the creation of jobs, but also the investment in skills from our overseas investors. I think that the ASOS, just to comment on the ASOS announcement yesterday, the headline figure there is that's 184 tech jobs for Northern Ireland, and some people do actually take a view which is, oh dear, that's more pressure. But actually, when you go beneath the headline, 130 of those jobs are going to be recruited from assured skills. Now, what that means is they're open to inexperienced people who don't have tech experience at all. They potentially over 18, and that effectively is a net contributor eventually, ultimately, to the pipeline. So you've got a project there, which is an FDI project. InvestNI is supporting it and is a net contributor to the ecosystem. So I don't think it's about pausing FDI. FDI is a good thing. I think there's a balance. But I think the issue that we really have and what we're really talking about today is how we promote the supply of skills in the tech sector. So I think that's fundamentally where I'm at with this.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective, because I know whenever we started to look at this as a business a number of years back, there was a view that we're very clear on what our demand is, but the supply isn't there. So actually, how do we create supply? And I suspect that's part of where this conversation is going to go to. But before we do, Simon, what are your own views on FDI as a local Indigenous company?
Yeah, and they've probably varied over the years, it's fair to say, at different times. I mean, we founded AI 11 years ago, and we've lived right through a major part of that FDI boom. And I have to say, and to put some context, we wouldn't have existed without InvestNI right from the outset. We based the company in Northern Ireland, even though I'm local. We looked at multiple places, and we decided to base ourselves here because of the support. So I'm very, very thankful for that, and I think there's a lot of really good support that does happen and lets organisations like us get off the ground and build something that's sustainable. The FDI is an interesting challenge. I sit on a crowd with the CEO Connect down in Catalyst, and it's a regular topic of debate, FDI, non-FDI, and where do we go with that? The outcome is ultimately it has to be balanced, and I think that's what you've said as well, George. We skill people up. I had a situation a couple of years ago where two senior engineers right at the top of the organisation were attracted to an FDI, and their conclusion was that we had poured too many skills into them. We trained them too much to make them too attractive to other organisations. And I just found it very funny to think that you want me to not invest in you so that you can't fulfil your potential. And ultimately, for me, a large part of what we're doing is building potential in Northern Ireland. We wouldn't be anywhere where we are today without FDI, without that bubble that has been built. I don't think it's going to burst. I think what we find is, like anywhere, and this is right throughout life, in times of adversity and stress, that's where we actually grow and we figure out how to solve these problems. So is there a challenge? Absolutely. Do we want people and can't find them? Yes. But that's everywhere. That's not going to change. And in fact, chatting last week with a bunch of CEOs, the conclusion was that FDI isn't the challenge anymore. It's London, it's New York, it's the fact that COVID has changed the game in terms of where people can work now. So all of a sudden, it's not the big guys down the road, it's a global market. And if we as Indigenous companies can't play in that space, if we can't figure out how to get the right people working for us regardless, then that's the real challenge. So we need to look at ourselves and figure out how we solve this problem for ourselves, not sit back and complain because there's 150 jobs coming in from America or wherever.
Yeah, sorry, George.
I was just going to say, just as funny stories go, I got a call the day of the PwC ARC announcement from a disgruntled customer, or semi-disgruntled customer, complaining that we had given more money to big companies like PwC or whatever. And particularly the fact that, from a skills perspective, it was going to create more pressure on skills, as William sort of outlined. It was only when I then reminded him or pointed out the fact that the individual had recruited 3 or 4 of PwC staff over the recent period that actually went, right enough, actually. And that's just part of the way it works. It's part of the ecosystem. It's the fact that large companies that were FDIs maybe 10 years ago are net contributors to the skills pipeline today, and that's the cycle that exists. And so again, I'm less interested in the FDI part of it. It's the skills supply part of it. But the FDI companies, the large Indigenous companies, the companies that we think are Indigenous, but they're not really. There's lots of them about that have been here for years. They're the guys that are providing a supply of skills for large and small, and there's a place for everybody. But as Simon was saying, I think the challenge is that we need to work together to create that supply, and it's not easy. And,
Yeah, and I think the supply issue is the one that really does seem to be really prevalent at the moment, and one that I want actually Chris and Jim to comment on, because I read a very interesting report over the weekend published by Northern Ireland Government on IT sector future supply skills. And when you look at the data, it's suggesting that the numbers of people coming through university with degrees and exiting as computing qualifiers is decreasing, but at the same time, you're increasing the number, and we can see an increasing trend around the number of people coming through with ICT HLAs. And then also, you then start to look at things like assured skills, where you've got 10 times as many people applying for assured skills academies as actually have available places. And part of this strikes me that there is a strong desire in people in Northern Ireland to enter this market. They actually want to move into technology. They want those technology roles, but actually the supply of opportunity and the opportunity for them to reskill maybe isn't quite where it needs to be. And everybody in this panel is going to have a view on that, so we'll come back to you all. But from a university's perspective, how do we ensure that we do actually have, I guess, the right courses and graduate and postgraduate levels that meet the needs of Indigenous businesses? And do you get a clear enough line of sight on what businesses really need, and what can we do to help you? Either of you, go first. Go, Jim.
Okay. Look, I mean, it is a great topic. It's a great place to be, a bubble. And I suppose our job in the bubble is to make sure that Northern Ireland is in the world map, you know, like from the point of view of research excellence and teaching excellence. Because if you're on the world map, then, you know, you can attract the students and the master's students we need. So, I mean, every year now we're putting out into the marketplace 1,200 computing and engineering graduate students from Ulster University, Queen's, probably a number similar, maybe bigger. But the excellence piece of that is extremely important, and that's where research comes in, where our ventures and working with industry and producing challenges. The net effect of that is that we become acclaimed as a university, ranking well. You get better staff in, you teach at a higher level. As you teach at a higher level, the net gain in that is that we're keeping up with the AI demands and the future challenges, where then FDI comes in the back of that, but the Indigenous companies come out from the universities. Those young graduates are skilled with entrepreneurship and innovation, and they can grow their own things. So it's a matrix of approach. There's a whole plethora from assured skills, you know, to that undergraduate, and there's various qualities of undergraduate students coming out as well, to the masters, and then on to the, you know, the excellent work that PwC is doing with us at the minute, as are other companies at forming centres of excellence, where you bring the masters or the PhD students as well, you know, into that environment. And with that, after 3 or 4 years, they will go out and probably do their own thing. But the net effect is they're feeding that whole learning process and entrepreneurship process back into other students that are coming through. So it's building up that critical mass, that matrix that's coming through, keeping us on the world stage. I mean, there's a point I make about attracting good skills in a company, and I've had 3 or 4 spin-out companies over the years, that you maybe need 2 or 3 very, very high-quality IT people in the company. Then you need people to feed off that, and you build your company up in that fashion. Now, hopefully we can attract most of those people locally, but if we get ourselves properly mapped onto the world stage, as I keep making, you can attract some great people. I mean, over this last 2 or 3 years, we've been, for our jobs, PDRA jobs or lecturing jobs, we've been attracting, you know, 100, 200 applicants coming into tech type jobs. You need the greater infrastructure here to fully attract them, because it's not just the person. It might be the spouse, it might be the children, it might be everybody else that's there. So, you know, our economic climate, our social climate, our health climate, our climate associated with stability and all the rest of it has to be right to get to, because that's part of that bigger picture, like continuing to actually grow it. But I'm old enough to remember, what, 30 years ago, this was a pipe dream. We were quite selfish and jealous in many ways of what was happening in the south of Ireland. I mean, Dublin put a lot of money into ICT and grew it very, very quickly. We were spilling out, getting the spillover, I think, from that at that stage. But now, you know, we are standing on our own 2 feet, and much of it is Indigenous companies, and it's Indigenous companies that are doing extremely well. And that's what excites me more sometimes than dominating the conversation necessarily with FDI.
Chris?
Well, I guess I could tell everyone and bore everyone about course approval processes and how we match needs of employers to courses, but I just think that would be too painful at this time. But instead, I'll talk a little bit about why I came here. And in my private life, I'm a rugby coach, right? I spent 26 years in Scotland getting beaten by rugby teams from this part of the world. And I came here, I had a bunch of offers, and I wanted to come here because I felt this place had some soul, and I mean all of Northern Ireland. And yet I come into my own university, and I kind of think the thing that we do really, really effectively is kill that soul. You know, we push people through a process that, in a way, acts against all of the things, all of the creativity and all of the passion that I see on the rugby pitch or in other sports played here. And I think part of the challenge for us here is this bubble will burst. If we keep on acting the way that we do and try and emulate Seattle or you know, I don't know, say London, we'll carry on doing exactly what the problem is here, which the elephant in the room here is the talent export. You know, it's the brain drain. And I came here because I want to reverse that. And I want to reverse that by having a sense of place and what Northern Ireland can really do better than any other part of the world. And let's not kid ourselves, I do not think Northern Ireland is on the world stage technically. If we want to reverse that brain drain, we have to do things differently. And if I look at that, if I look at the difference between myself as an engineer, like I grew up in the Challenger and Columbia years where people were responding to failures in technology. If I look at what my children are passionate about, it's things like ethics. And that's not the sustainable development goals. It's things like understanding how you can make a machine learning algorithm that doesn't disadvantage people from a poor postcode when they go on and try and shop online. Now, to me, that chimes with why I came to Northern Ireland in the first place. And there are all sorts of other opportunities in other areas of technology. So, for example, one of the things I've been doing since I've been working here is working with Thales on the application of machine learning in military systems. And I believe that you can only do that if you have a real clear understanding of who you are and what your ethical values are. So I will cure the supply chain by trying to create a passion about engineering in Northern Ireland. But I really rely on the companies not to try and take this creativity that we can provide and squeeze it into everything to do with fintech in an uncreative way, right? So I think that, for example, what's going on by bringing employees into universities and taking chances with the way that we do technology in universities is where we should go. And the only way that we'll get onto the world stage is if we take risks and if we do things differently and if we harness the passion that's in Northern Ireland. That's my feeling.
Okay. And I do think probably we are people who do have passion, and for a lot of people who live and work in Northern Ireland, they're extremely proud of the place where they work and why they work here. And Simon, I'm conscious, obviously, you've talked a little bit about this yourself in terms of being very proud to have set up a company in Northern Ireland. How do you respond to what Chris said?
I think you're absolutely right, Chris, and I think our challenge is when we talk about skills is how do we go far enough back in the journey of young people to bring them forward where we need them to be with that creativity and tact and that ability. I was sharing with somebody earlier, my son's doing he's just joined 6th year. He's doing a software system design A-level, which the name of itself, it doesn't surprise me that there's only 5 males doing it, because you give it a topic like that. The course is fantastic. It's really exciting from my perspective, looking in terms of what we want people to have in the future. Great skills, but we need to break the confines that we're putting around some of this stuff, make it more interesting. Where does ethics play in that? How do we get that in as part of the curriculum? And for me, that's where we need to start. Some of the best people we've ever had work for us are people that we've plucked out of school in 6th year. We've educated, we've trained them, we've brought them right through, and they've now left us to go on and do much bigger and better things. But that's brilliant. You know, being part of somebody's journey, it's not about how do we get people, restrain them to work in AI for the next 10 years and bleed them dry, but it's how do we be part of somebody's journey, because we're all on that journey. And as employers, we need to think a whole lot more holistically about the people and make sure that we develop a culture and create a culture that actually lets people flourish as themselves, not just so that they can be good engineers or put them in those bubbles. So I think we all have a big part to play in terms of, we're talking about the tech bubble, about making sure that we don't constrain things, so we end up with this repeat of let's just build let's build fintech companies because that's the cool thing to do. Let's just do what we can do really well.
Yeah, and William, I'm interested in your views on this as well, because I'm sure you'll have one: passion, purpose. Talk to me about what that means for you.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think you do need to have some passion. I think it goes back to your original question about how we work more effectively with the universities, etc. And I've been quite passionate about that over the years, because if you work with the universities, there's three obvious things. You can stay at the leading edge of research. You get credibility in terms of the university underpinning the work you're engaging in. And as well as that, you're able to ensure that the university have research and that's applied and courses that are relevant for industry as well. And just a couple of examples of that. The first one, I'll give a shout out to BT here, but the BT Ireland Innovation Centre was set up a number of years ago now, and the model was to work with universities, and so happened it was Ulster University at that time. And it was really great because we explored a model where, because of university fundings and research rankings and stuff, the universities needed more impact, which is to Jim's point. And how do they get more impact? They get more impact by working closer with industry. So we did exactly that. And that's evolved, and there is a model there. And what we've done recently with ARC, the Advanced Research and Engineering Centre, we sort of amplified that slightly insofar as we're not just working with Ulster now, we're working with, and this is with PwC by the way, we're working with Queen's University. And we're all working together, and Queen's and Ulster will be working together on the same projects. And we'll all be co-located together in our new building, Merchant Square, and maybe at the new campus that Ulster has, and up at Queen's as well. And really that lets us that lets the universities be fully embedded in what we're engaging in, from business and technology challenges in industry, and then that gives them the information they need to really effectively tailor their courses and their student output. But it comes back to my original point, and one of the key driving principles of ARC, which is that we all need to work together, and that's not just inside PwC, but that's with our academic partners, our industrial partners, and within the wider region as well. So it's not just about us; it's about everyone, and it gives us all an opportunity to solve problems together.
The concept of working together is a really interesting one. We all talk about working collaborative. What does working together look like as we seek to address the technology bubble? What does it actually mean?
Can I pick up some of that points, right? So let's talk realistically, right? I've talked about passion. Let's talk about some of the structural things that are causing problems. So there is a legacy in the way that local companies work with Northern Irish universities, in that what's happening is they are asking us to retrain staff not in world-leading techniques, but in techniques that are already well understood elsewhere. So we've become a vehicle for technology transfer and not for true innovation. So, machine learning algorithms. Northern Ireland does not really innovate in machine learning algorithms. What the universities are being asked to do is retrain people. And as a consequence, what will happen to our universities is that we will just go down the league table. I mean, Queen's will continue dropping down the world table, because what I need to do to get the passion and inspiration and to back up the words about Northern Ireland being world leading is to also not just focus on the companies, but focus on the skills the companies will need in 10 years' time, not what they'll use today. And the way this bubble will burst, I think, is if I can't protect enough staff to ask the question, what will computing look like in 10 years? Instead of just focusing on technology transfer all the time. So it's a really, really dangerous balance. And I feel that I've inherited a faculty or a group of schools that have really paid a huge attention to local companies, and I need them to sit back and say, what is happening in Cambridge? What is happening in Stanford? What is happening in MIT? Because otherwise what we'll end up doing is, these are backed up by metrics. Very few of my departments do innovation work that leads to patents. And that's a real problem, because what that's really saying is that we are technology transferring. Queen's is the best university, or one of the best universities in the UK in impact and technology transfer, but we don't create patents, which means that we are effectively transferring other people's technology. So there are structural issues, and we need to sit back, and I think what defines Northern Ireland is as much by what we choose not to do, so that we can focus on those areas that we can really excel in. So for example, rather than fintech, I think the regulatory environment, FinReg, is really important, because we've got two different regulatory environments to the south and to the east. So we're ideally placed to start innovating about software development that we can sell in the United States and other countries where the regulatory system divulges. There's a huge opportunity there. But let's not get into forcing universities to create 30,000 people, whatever it is, in the AI sector, where there is a limited timeline, unless you can really innovate with the technologies. So I think you have to be careful about this ecosystem issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've been working with CSIT and ESIT, which is across the road from us very conveniently, is actually, we've looked at the AI challenge, and we're called AI, right? But that's 11 years ago. Is actually, how do we get the best of the university? Because what we don't see any point is us repeating all of that, learning from scratch. There's a bunch of skills in Queen's particularly. They're working on that. So we've been trying to find a way to not direct Queen's and saying this is what we need, but to say, can you tell us where this industry's going? Can you tell us what the future is, so that we can actually harness that, rather than starting from ground zero and trying to build an entire ecosystem ourselves? Because there's no point. If we're going to succeed as a country, we need to have a base level of AI capability that everybody can harness, that we don't all have to build it individually, and the universities are in the perfect place to actually take us on that journey, to set the stall out in terms of this is where we could be and this is how we can benefit that, rather than just churning out people for us to put bums on seats.
I'm going to go to Jim. Everybody has a point of view in this one, so just...
Yeah, I mean, this is probably where city deals really come in. I mean, to defend probably the universities over those last 20 or 30 years, maybe many of the companies wouldn't have happened if they hadn't maybe gone to university, been inspired by some of the things that they've seen, or some of the indigenous companies that come out, etc. But it could be a lot more efficient. So, I mean, city deals now, I can only talk in detail about my own one, but they all have a very simple philosophy. It's about productivity and enhancing productivity in industry, but also in some of the models that has just been referred to, because there are weaknesses in there. We know it. I mean, sometimes we're so focused on working with one company. Why could we not be working with 20 or 30 companies at the same time? So I spent a bit of time about 7 or 8 years ago in Stanford looking at D-Lab, which is an innovation lab, and it's quite simple. The companies come in and base themselves in the lab, and the Maxwell Institute at Cambridge have done something very simpler, and I sit in their board and simply saw how efficient this process really is. So as part of, and we're focused on is health technology, an interesting point about health technology in the IT and engineering sectors, it is attracting females. I mean, 50% of our current biomedical engineering degree, with 100 each year coming in, is females. That's 50 engineers coming in that sector. So that's how we open up some of the skills in there. But back to my point about living together, co-ideation, and developing up living lab concepts where you truly develop the need, the UX, the engineering design principle from first stages up, is where when you're working directly with the company, sharing space, co-locating, open access for a lot of what you do, and developing the model up that way. So we've seats for 150 companies to come in and join, 35 academics and about 60 PDRAs in the centre. When it gets approved, and hopefully we'll be announcing these very, very shortly, but that over the next 2 or 3 years will be the plan, a completely different model for rapid innovation based in living lab concepts in the digital healthcare space.
Yeah, George, you were going to...
No, I just think this is a really broad area, so fair enough, innovation and world leading innovation is one part of that, and we've benefited from the likes of CSIT over the years, and that has helped the economy grow and businesses locate here and such like. But I think it is so broad. I don't think you sort of rely on that as that's not the only element of it, and you need the foundation beneath that. You need the universities to be giving the maybe the more basic understanding of what the technologies are about and how they use them and how to apply them. And then when you go backwards beyond that, it's not all about university. It's about primary schools. It's about secondary schools. You know, it's all that. It's that career attractiveness piece. You know, it's just so broad, and I suppose that's why it's so difficult, because we need to join up to try and solve the problem. I do think that at Invest and we use this. Northern Ireland's a small place, despite what people might think. It is a really small place. You know, it's about 2/3 of the population of Greater Manchester. You can get one end to the other in 2 hours. You know, so you know that is an advantage, because we're small and we can collaborate and we can work together very effectively. That's why Assured Skills exists. It doesn't exist anywhere else. It only exists in Northern Ireland because we can work together with education, further education universities, government, Invest and businesses. It works. So the same concept, if we can apply that more broadly to the skills challenge, insofar as bringing together education, economy, employment in that sense, bringing in and obviously the academia and the all the stakeholders, I guess. So you know, I just think it's such a broad issue. We need a framework for that. I don't want to sort of start plugging strategies or whatever else. You know, the big sort of buzzword at the minute is the 10x economy piece, and hopefully the skills, there's a real focus there in technologies, cluster skills. Okay, so that focus exists at the minute. Maybe there's an opportunity now to take advantage of that and to actually join everything together through that sort of the skills to the 10x economy piece of work that has been ongoing. So I just think it's a broad point. We have an opportunity to bring it all together. Not easy. It'll be a challenge for us all. We play a part, the universities will play a part, and the businesses will play a part. But we all need to work together. It's back to William's point. We all need to work together. So that's just where I see it. I don't think it's one thing as opposed to another.
And William?
Just a quick wrap up on that one, maybe. So we really do see universities as key partners in terms of what we're doing, both at a working level and a strategic level, and as part of the Advanced Research and Engineering Centre, we're creating 38 postdocs at both universities. But it's really important for the universities to help guide us and really work with us in partnership, both in short, medium, and long-term research. We've got programs of work over 5 years and a 10-year horizon, so we're doing something that's going to be around for a while. And part of that, and a really important part of that, is the university sitting in our strategic steering board to set the research agenda over that period of time. So it's not just industry informing the universities of what we need done, it's the universities informing us of what that strategic research agenda should look like as well. And I think that's really important, and maybe a little bit novel at the minute as well. But it's certainly something that's repeatable, I think.
That's understood. I think that piece around strategies it's a really salient point, because actually it's what do we want to be famous for going forward. So thanks, Chris, for raising that one, because it certainly sparked a bit right across the panel. We'll come back to it maybe at the end. Conscious, George, you did mention Northern Ireland is a very small place. It's hugely parochial also, and often there's a bit of criticism levied at the technology sector. Is it just technology jobs for Belfast? What about the rest of Northern Ireland? And is there enough being done to kind of look at this right across our province, which I fully accept is incredibly small, and yes, you can get from one end of it to the other in 2 hours, maybe even on a bicycle. But just interested in your views around Belfast versus the rest of Northern Ireland.
Well, my own view, my personal view is that it is reasonably easily answered. In other words, as I say, Northern Ireland is a small place. We can't afford to be. We need critical mass. I think somebody said that earlier, and we really can't afford to be fragmented. I mean, that's a key point. I think the world has changed, obviously, over the last 2 years, as we all know, and we are much more accepting of remote working, and technology jobs are ideally suited to remote working. So in that context, I think the world has changed. I think that there's a real opportunity now that to change the narrative. In other words, what we should be more concerned about is, rather than where a company has its HQ, or its main premises, whatever, it's less important. What's really important is where people live and work, and they typically work at home. So in that sense, the world has changed. The narrative should change. As long as, you know, Northern Ireland's a lovely place. You know, if you're living in Port Rush or Port Stewart or Newcastle or Enniskillen or Londonderry, Derry, does it matter? if you're working for PwC, who's got a big shiny building in Bedford Square. I don't really think so. So the important thing is that people have employment wherever they choose to live. And actually it comes back to some of the points we made earlier, actually, about the fact that actually it's all about lifestyle and all those broader things, So that's what we want to attract people to Northern Ireland because they want to live here. And where they work within Northern Ireland, for me, is less of an issue. You mentioned about, I suppose, the investment in Belfast rather than Northern Ireland, but actually, again, the stats belie that myth insofar as the majority of businesses are in Belfast, that they'll inevitably gravitate towards larger populations, more skills, blah, blah, blah. That's just normal. But if you actually look at who we support, most of the businesses are in Belfast, but most of our support goes to businesses outside of Belfast. So, I think it's less of an issue now, as I say, and I think it's just a question of again, trying to promote opportunities across Northern Ireland. City deals will do some of that, actually. And I think that's again at McGee, you've got the Carl, you've got Cedra, again, I'm not really the best person to be talking about them, but there's, I think it's 250 million investment through the Northwest City deal. You got the South Midwest and the Causeway Coast and Glens, all aimed actually about promoting technologies and the use of technologies. So, I think Northern Ireland's a small place. That's the bottom line. Let's work together again collectively. So.
Jim?
I mean, it's maybe a minor point, but I suppose universities do get beaten up quite a bit in this, and it's not just universities have a role to play, of course, industry has a role to play as well. And one thing, and I'm not going to look at anybody when I say this here, but one feedback I would get from some of our best students, right, okay, might be that the challenges that they get out in companies is not as good as it should be, right, okay. So they would travel to London or they would travel elsewhere to get that challenge. Maybe it might be a coding program, it might be an AI challenge, it might be an application challenge, but anybody out there as a programmer is always looking to better their programming skills. It's part of the CV challenge or the whole development skills challenge for them. So are we doing enough of that? Are we in a company maybe looking after some of those bright stars that we can maybe escalate them faster or better? University, we can do so much within a curriculum. We have to be fair to everybody. Get them to a PhD stage and we can do things, right? But if you go out as an undergraduate, if you want to keep them here in Northern Ireland, the challenges have to be great, It can't be routine software coding or validation or error on a continuous basis for everybody. So that's a challenge I would set to Northern Ireland.
That might be an argument for bringing in more FDI.
I would argue that we've always used the FDI to provide that, so we can steal them and take them to the next level.
Well, I don't know about anybody else here, but I can't get from one side of Belfast to the other in 2 hours. I mean, maybe I'm just learning how to navigate, but I think we also need to be realistic.
Yes.
Our students have been starved of contact for the last 18 months. And the thing they need more than anything, I think, is that student experience. And in a sense, there's a reason why they come to Belfast. It's because there's a buzz around the city and because they want to meet other people of like-mindedness and want to exchange ideas of people of their generation and so on. And for sure, there's a problem with regionalisation, but I mean, I think for me, the really fundamental issue is that we want to challenge them with world-scale problems. We don't want to challenge them with Belfast-scale problems. And this whole idea about the bubble bursting, for me, is I feel like I'm in a fishbowl already. And I whenever I look at, so for example, some funding coming our way from Stormont or from other areas of the economy, I'm always asking, how would this compare with how Singapore do things? And I think the city deal is important, but we need also to be slightly more ambitious even beyond that and say, if we want to be on the world stage, I don't think Singapore's going to be looking to city deal and saying, this is the key to the Northern Ireland economy in 10 years' time. So we need to work our way back and say, if we want people in, and I'll use Singapore as the example, but it could be, for instance, the Vietnamese economy is evolving incredibly rapidly. So we really have to cop on and catch up with the world-leading economies and learn our lessons from them. And that's why I say passion, alignment with the next generation's views of what technology should do and enable, and then also working closely with the companies in the way that we've discussed. This is really, really important. But if we don't have a vision and we don't have a passion, all we'll do is make small incremental steps while the rest of the world is taking giant leaps.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, and I think it's a point very well made, Chris. And actually, now you've had 2 rounds of applause during this panel, so I think you'll definitely be a frequent flyer on panels in future. But just a really interesting perspective, because there is this point where sometimes we can be very inward in our view, and we are only a population of about 1.8 million people, as you say, 2/3 the size of Manchester. We need to be constantly looking externally to see what other companies are doing, what other countries are doing, learn from it, and actually be on the front foot, which I think is an excellent way to summarise this. Conscious there's quite a lot of people in the room, and we have a few minutes just at the end here before we have to close up. Oh, I see a hand straight up in the corner. Okay, go on ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, Chris, I think what you said is amazing. I'd love to give you a hug, and just, do you think we're doing enough? And this is just a wider conversation around panels, to be honest. Do you think we're doing enough to make sure that diversity is represented? And how do we talk about the tech industry if all of these panels are generally always people who look like me? What are we doing about that within your company to make sure that other people's voices are heard on stages like this?
Do you want me to answer that? I mean, I've never been so aware of the importance of diversity as I have been in Belfast. I'm surrounded by people in Queens who are really passionate about that. And it's really, I don't know what to say. I mean, I grew up with a certain set of beliefs and values, but I think maybe it's a midlife crisis. Part of coming here has challenged a lot of those. And I have staff around me who I just go and ask, what is this kind of the middle-aged white guy's view or whatever? And I think what's really interesting about that question is a bunch of my PhD students from Rwanda and Nigeria have suddenly taken jobs here. And so I went out I went literally last weekend, I went to pick up this PhD student from Nigeria, Belfast International Airport. He got off the plane. He knew nothing about Northern Ireland. And I was like, okay, I have to fill him in on everything that's happened in the last 30 years or probably 300 years before he reaches the hotel. So what do you tell him? So, and I'm every time speaking to him over coffee and saying, what's your impression? What are you picking up? And so on. And I think, so far it's been really positive. So all the critical things I'm saying, right, I care passionately about being here. And my experience has been fantastically positive, even under COVID. I mean, okay, this panel accepted, and it has been explained that one of the panelists is not able to join us because of COVID. And that might have made a small difference to the balance, at least in gender, but if not, background. But I think everybody's heart is in the right place, but there are long-standing issues that we struggle with. But I mean, I think it's a fantastic question, and it's something that every day of my life, we'll never have a worldview if we don't take the diverse voices into account. That's how I view it, right?
Yeah, I'm going to maybe pick that one up a little bit as well, because I'm conscious that often I find myself in a room where I'm outnumbered, pretty much like this panel today. And I guess from a personal perspective, I think it's something everybody has to deal with as an individual. So you take it away and you go, do I want this room to always look like this? What can I do to make a change? And it's on each of us, I think, an onus on each of us to do something to make that change. It's personal.
Yeah, from my perspective, one of the things that annoys me about here and everywhere is that we have to think about diversity and have to give it a platform, because it should just be that we shouldn't be there. And I can say that, and I'm not. It's not planned or anything, but over 50% of our management team is female. Our head of engineering is female. I think we're one of the few companies that have that over here. That's not planned. That's because they're the best people for the job, and that's the way it should be. Diversity shouldn't, and sadly it is, but it shouldn't be something that we have to bow to or try to work around. It's the best people for the job, and yeah, it's a frustration that it's a topic that we have to deal with. But it's really, really important that it is the best people for the job, and that we learn. This is a diverse world. We are a very myopic little part of the world with a very slanted and maybe somewhat broken mindset, and we need that worldview. The best thing I ever did when I was young was get out of Northern Ireland for a period of time. Now, I went to Afghanistan, so you might say I didn't quite get a balanced view there, but my gosh, it was a different worldview, and certainly has influenced and given me a more global view in terms of what a company and what the world should look like.
But I suppose I'm fairly practical in these things. For me, actually, the important consequence of diversity is the fact that it's a huge opportunity for this sector. You look at, 30% of females do STEM subjects, 80% of boys do at least one STEM subject. It's just not right. And if we can encourage more females into the profession, then, to be honest, we solve the problem, actually, when you look at the numbers, depending on which numbers you believe. But essentially, if we could get an equal balance from a gender perspective, that would make a massive difference. And actually, again, the point that I made earlier about the fact that it's flexible with remote working, we should. So anyway, that's just another one of the challenges. That's that broad picture that somebody and all of us need to have a role to play in terms of making that happen for the right reasons. As Simon said, because the best people for the job, no argument about that. But there's a huge untapped talent pool out there which we need to take advantage of, maybe for selfish reasons, but it comes down to the same thing.
Jim?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've lived through 35, 36 years, and the troubles saw the equality and maybe even some of the diversity, but very, very ripe in that. We all know about that now. We've moved on a lot, so I see changes every 5 years that make a difference, but this can't go away. From when you design something like a City Deal initiative, equality and diversity screening has to be fundamental in your thinking process, from how you interview, to the design of a building, to the concept behind it, how you communicate it, how you portray it. Like, even when our own School of Engineering and School of Computing, looked at it, maybe, you might remember this, maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, not saying that, 15 years ago.
Thanks, Jim.
All male, teaching, female role models, but that's changed now. You come back and we have 9 out of 40, not enough, but that's the role models that are important to bring STEM subjects through, to allow students to be motivated, knowing that females can reach that level. And diversity, I have to say, at both universities, we've certainly addressed, multicultural academics again, which is introducing many new nations of the world to students, as maybe for the first time. And very often that experience is good. And that's what opens up the world and helps the diversity. And hopefully that works its way into Northern Ireland society a bit deeper. But I think the universities do lead the way on that.
Yeah, and some things are very easily measured around diversity, things that are very visual, but actually a lot of it's actually about diversity of thought and making sure that it is fully diverse and inclusive in every way, not just the things that are very easily measured, but some of the things that actually are very important to how we even develop this sector. Challenges laid out very clearly. We need to work together. We believe that that's the solution. Hopefully everybody in the room is with us on that. So let's work together and let's make sure this bubble doesn't burst, or if it does burst, it reconvenes and it becomes a slightly different bubble, but still with this very vibrant sector. So thank you everybody for your time today.